The planet Erythra was a barren wasteland, its surface covered in jagged rocks and endless stretches of gray dust. The sky above was a swirling mix of dark red and deep purple, casting an eerie glow over the desolate landscape. Commander Ziller stood at the edge of a crater, his metallic boots crunching softly against the ground. Behind him, a team of alien explorers moved cautiously, their glowing eyes scanning the ruins scattered around them. The ruins were ancient, their origins unknown even to Ziller's people. Broken pillars and crumbling walls stretched as far as the eye could see, remnants of a civilization long forgotten. At the center of the site stood a massive stone tablet, its surface etched with strange symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly under the dim light. Xylar approached it slowly, his clawed hand reaching out to touch the cold surface. He felt a strange vibration, almost like a heartbeat, pulsing through the stone. "What is this?" asked Vren, one of Ziller's crew members. Her voice was low and cautious, tinged with both curiosity and fear. She carried a scanning device in her hands, but its readings were erratic, jumping between numbers too quickly to make sense of. "I don't know," Xylar replied, his tone equally uneasy. "But it feels alive." As they examined the tablet, their attention was drawn to the inscriptions. The symbols were unlike anything they had encountered before, twisting and curling in patterns that seemed to shift when stared at for too long. One phrase stood out among the rest, repeating itself in a circular pattern around the edges of the tablet. "Humans are sleeping war gods. Pray they don't wake." "What does it mean?" Vren asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Humans? Are they talking about those primitive beings from the blue planet?" Ziller didn't answer immediately. His mind raced with possibilities. Humans were considered insignificant by most advanced species, their technology rudimentary, and their lives fleeting. Yet there was something about the way the words were carved into the stone, as if they carried a weight far greater than any language should. "We need to find out," Xylar finally said, his voice firm. "If there's even a chance this message is true, we can't ignore it." Meanwhile, billions of miles away, on a small blue planet called Earth, life went on as usual. In a quiet town in Ohio, Daniel Carter wiped grease from his hands after fixing a car engine. He was a simple man, content with his job as a mechanic and his uneventful routine. Across the country, in Colorado, Emily Dawson prepared lesson plans for her elementary school class. She loved teaching and found joy in the laughter of her students. Neither Daniel nor Emily had any idea that their lives were about to change forever. They went to bed that night just like any other, unaware of the ancient forces stirring across the galaxy. As they slept, distant stars twinkled faintly in the night sky, their light carrying whispers of a past long buried, and a future waiting to awaken. Back on Erythra, Xylar and his team discovered a hidden compartment beneath the tablet. Inside was a small metallic device covered in the same shimmering symbols. Without fully understanding what it was, Xylar activated it. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The device emitted a pulse of energy that shot upward, disappearing into the sky. Unbeknownst to anyone, that pulse traveled across galaxies, heading straight for Earth. It would reach its destination in mere hours, carrying with it the potential to awaken something humanity had long forgotten. For now, though, the universe remained silent, holding its breath as the first domino began to fall. The device on Erythra continued to hum, its energy rippling outward like ripples in a pond. Commander Ziller and his team watched cautiously, unsure of what they had unleashed. The symbols on the tablet seemed to glow brighter now, shifting and twisting as if alive. Vren stepped back instinctively, her scanning device beeping wildly. "Something's happening," she said, her voice tight with unease. "The readings, they're off the charts." Ziller didn't respond. He stared at the device, his sharp eyes narrowing. Whatever it was powerful. Too powerful for comfort. But it was too late to stop it now. The pulse of energy had already left the planet, traveling faster than anything they had ever encountered. It would reach Earth soon, though none of them knew exactly what that meant. On Earth, Daniel Carter tossed and turned in his bed. His dreams were strange, filled with flashes of light and unfamiliar landscapes. He saw himself standing on a battlefield under twin suns, wielding a weapon that glowed like fire. Around him, others fought alongside him, their faces blurred but their presence strong. Daniel woke with a start, his heart pounding. He sat up, wiping sweat from his forehead, and glanced at the clock. It was just past midnight. What was that? He muttered to himself, shaking his head. He tried to shake off the vivid images, telling himself it was just a weird dream. But something about it felt different, too real, too intense. Across the country, Emily Dawson wasn't faring much better. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as fragments of her own dream lingered in her mind. In her vision, she had been surrounded by people, their thoughts and emotions flooding into her like waves crashing against a shore. She could feel their pain, their fear, their hope, all at once. It was overwhelming, yet strangely familiar, as if she had experienced it before. Emily sighed and rolled over, trying to clear her mind. Just stress, she whispered to herself, though she didn't sound convinced. The next morning, Daniel went about his usual routine, but something felt off. As he worked on a car in his garage, he accidentally cut his hand on a piece of metal. He winced, expecting the sharp sting of pain, but instead, he watched in shock as the cut began to heal almost instantly. Within seconds, the wound was gone, leaving only smooth skin behind. What the? Daniel stared at his hand, his heart racing. He pinched himself to make sure he wasn't dreaming. The sensation was real, undeniable. Something inside him had changed, but he couldn't explain how or why. At the same time, Emily noticed something unusual too. While teaching her class, she found herself knowing exactly what her students were thinking before they spoke. When little Timmy raised his hand to ask about fractions, Emily answered his question before he even opened his mouth. Her students giggled, thinking it was some kind of magic trick, but Emily felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't normal, not by a long shot. Elsewhere, others began experiencing similar phenomena. Sarah Bennett, a journalist in New York, woke up to find she could sense when someone was lying to her. Lucas Hayes, a farmer in Kansas, discovered he could move objects with his mind after accidentally knocking over a stack of hay bales without touching them. These changes were subtle at first, almost easy to dismiss, but they grew stronger with each passing day. Sarah decided to investigate further. She started looking into reports of strange occurrences around the world, digging through news articles and social media posts. Patterns began to emerge, people describing abilities they never had before, all within the same time frame. It was as if something had triggered these changes globally, connecting them in ways no one understood. Lucas, on the other hand, kept his newfound powers to himself. He lived alone on his farm, far from prying eyes, and spent hours experimenting with his abilities. At first, he moved small rocks and tools, but soon he found he could lift heavier objects, like his tractor. The power thrilled him, but it also scared him. What did it mean? And why him? Back on Erythra, Ziller's concerns deepened. His team detected faint signals coming from Earth, responses to the pulse they had sent. They weren't sure what they had awakened, but one thing was certain: humanity was changing. The warning on the tablet echoed in Ziller's mind. Humans are sleeping war gods. He turned to Vren, his expression grim. We need to prepare, he said. Whatever happens next, we can't face it unready. Vren nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. Neither of them knew what was coming, but they both felt it in their bones. The calm before the storm. Daniel Carter couldn't stop thinking about the cut on his hand. It had healed so quickly, almost like magic. He tried to convince himself it was just a fluke, maybe some trick of the light or a delayed reaction. But deep down, He knew something wasn't right. As he worked in his garage later that day, he noticed other strange things happening. Tools seemed to move slightly when he reached for them, as if they were anticipating his touch. At first, he thought he was imagining it, but then a wrench floated gently into his hand without him even picking it up. "What the hell?" Daniel muttered, dropping the wrench onto the workbench. His heart raced as he stared at his hands. They looked normal, but they didn't feel normal. There was a tingling sensation running through his fingers, like electricity buzzing under his skin. He clenched and unclenched his fists, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was he losing his mind, or was something else going on? Emily Dawson's day wasn't much better. After her unsettling morning at school, she decided to take a walk to clear her head. She strolled through the park near her house, enjoying the cool breeze and the sound of birds chirping. But no matter how hard she tried to relax, she couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her had changed. When she passed a young couple sitting on a bench, she suddenly felt a rush of emotions. Joy, longing, uncertainty, all flooding into her mind at once. She stopped in her tracks, gripping a nearby tree for support. "Are you okay?" a voice asked. Emily turned to see an older man looking at her with concern. She forced a smile and nodded. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice trembled. The man gave her a curious look but walked away. Emily leaned against the tree, breathing deeply. What was happening to her? Why could she suddenly sense people's feelings like this? It was overwhelming, but also strangely familiar, as if she had always been able to do it but had forgotten. Sarah Bennett spent her afternoon digging deeper into the reports she had found. She sat at her desk in her small apartment, surrounded by papers and open tabs on her laptop. The more she read, the more convinced she became that something extraordinary was happening. People all over the world were describing similar experiences, unexplained abilities, vivid dreams, and a growing sense of connection to something bigger than themselves. Sarah jotted down notes, her pen moving quickly across the page. She felt a spark of excitement mixed with fear. This wasn't just a story, it was something far greater. Her phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was a message from Lucas Hayes, the farmer she had contacted earlier after reading about his unusual powers. "Can we talk?" the message read. Sarah hesitated for a moment before replying. "Yes. Let's meet." Lucas paced back and forth in his barn, his mind racing. He had tried to keep his abilities hidden, but the harder he pushed himself, the stronger they became. That morning, he had accidentally lifted his entire tractor off the ground while practicing. The sheer power scared him, but it also made him wonder, why him? Why now? When Sarah arrived, he greeted her cautiously, unsure of how much to share. But as they talked, he realized she already knew more than he expected. "We're not alone," Sarah said, showing him the articles and messages she had collected. "This is happening to people everywhere. Something big is going on, and I think it's connected to those weird dreams you mentioned." Lucas frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. "You think it's aliens or something?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, "but whatever it is, it's changing us, and we need to figure out why." On Erythra, Commander Ziller and his team monitored the signals coming from Earth. The responses were growing stronger, more frequent. Vrain adjusted the controls on their equipment, her face pale with worry. "They're awakening faster than we anticipated," she said softly. Ziller nodded, his jaw tightening. He had hoped they would have more time, but time was a luxury they no longer had. "We need to act," Ziller said finally. "If the humans fully awaken, there's no telling what they'll do or what they'll remember." Vren glanced at him, her glowing eyes filled with unease. "Do you really think they're war gods?" Ziller didn't answer immediately. He stared at the screen showing Earth, its blue surface shimmering faintly in the distance. "I don't know," he said at last, "but I prayed we don't find out." Sarah and Lucas sat in the dim light of the barn, surrounded by hay bales and the faint smell of earth. The air was thick with tension as they pieced together what they knew. Sarah spread out her notes on a makeshift table, pointing to patterns she had found in the reports. "Look at this," she said, her voice low but urgent. "All these people like you and me. They're saying the same things. Strange dreams, new abilities, and this feeling that something bigger is coming." Lucas leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. But why now? What's causing it? Sarah hesitated, then pulled out a printed article she had found earlier. It was about an ancient tablet discovered on a distant planet. The headline read, "Alien ruins hold cryptic warning about humanity." She slid it across the table toward Lucas. This might be connected. Apparently, some aliens found a message about humans being sleeping war gods. They think whatever's happening to us is tied to that. Lucas stared at the article, his brow furrowed. War gods. That sounds crazy. Maybe, Sarah admitted. But think about it. All these powers we're developing, they're not normal. What if there's truth to the warning? What if humanity was sealed away for a reason? Lucas shook his head, struggling to wrap his mind around the idea. If that's true, then what happens when we fully wake up? Do we turn into monsters? I don't know, Sarah said honestly. But we need to figure it out before anyone else gets hurt, or worse. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter's life was spiraling out of control. The strange tingling in his hands had grown stronger, and now he could feel energy coursing through his body. At first, it was subtle. A spark here, a flicker there, but soon he realized he could manipulate it. One evening, while working late in his garage, he accidentally sent a burst of energy flying from his palm, shattering a glass jar on the shelf. He froze, staring at the broken shards scattered across the floor. "What am I becoming?" he whispered to himself, his voice trembling. Fear gripped him, but beneath it was a flicker of curiosity. He clenched his fists and focused, trying to summon the energy again. This time, he managed to create a small orb of light hovering above his palm. It pulsed softly, casting shadows on the walls. Daniel's heart raced as he watched it, both terrified and fascinated by what he was capable of. Emily Dawson wasn't faring much better. Her ability to sense emotions had grown more intense, almost unbearable at times. She found herself overwhelmed by the feelings of those around her, unable to shut them out. During a grocery trip, she stood frozen in the middle of the aisle as waves of anger, sadness, and joy crashed over her. A man nearby argued with his wife, their voices sharp and cutting. Emily felt their pain like it was her own, and tears welled up in her eyes. A kind elderly woman approached her, mistaking her distress for something else. "Are you okay, dear?" the woman asked gently. Emily nodded quickly, forcing a smile. "I'm fine," she lied. But she wasn't fine. She didn't understand what was happening to her or how to control it. When she got home, she collapsed onto her couch, clutching her head. Memories from her dreams began flooding back, images of vast starships, glowing weapons, and battles fought among the stars. She closed her eyes, trying to push the visions away, but they lingered, haunting her. On Erythra, Commander Ziller and his team prepared for the worst. The signals from Earth were growing stronger, more erratic. Vren adjusted the equipment, her hands shaking slightly. "The humans are awakening faster than we predicted," she said, her voice tight with worry. "If this continues, we won't be able to stop them." Ziller stared at the screen showing Earth, its blue glow almost mocking in its calmness. "We have no choice," he said firmly. "We must intervene before it's too late." "But how?" Vren asked. "Their powers are already manifesting. If they remember who they truly are." Ziller cut her off, his tone grim. "Then we'll face the wrath of sleeping gods. Pray we succeed before that happens." As they planned their next move, neither of them noticed a faint pulse emanating from the device they had activated. It hummed softly, its energy reaching farther than they realized. Across galaxies, humanity stirred, its slumber breaking piece by piece. The universe held its breath, waiting to see what would rise from the ashes of forgotten legends. Commander Ziller's fleet moved silently through the void of space, their ships sleek and menacing against the backdrop of stars. The journey to Earth had been swift, driven by urgency and fear. As they approached the blue planet, Ziller stared at the glowing orb on his command screen, his mind heavy with doubt. He didn't want to believe the warnings etched into the ancient tablet, but the evidence was undeniable. Humanity was changing, and the consequences could be catastrophic. "We're entering orbit," Vren announced, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Scans show increased energy readings across the planet. It's spreading." Ziller nodded, his claws gripping the edge of the console. "Target key locations. We need to contain this before it spirals out of control." Back on Earth, Daniel Carter's life had taken a turn he couldn't explain. After discovering his ability to create and control energy, he tried to keep it hidden, practicing in secret when no one was around. But word got out. A neighbor saw him accidentally light up a street lamp just by touching it, and soon whispers spread through town. People began to look at him differently, some with awe, others with suspicion. One evening, two men in dark suits arrived at his garage, introducing themselves as agents from a government agency. "Mr. Carter," one of them said, flashing a badge, "we'd like to ask you a few questions." Daniel's stomach sank. He knew this moment would come eventually, but he wasn't ready for it. "About what?" he asked, trying to sound calm. "You've been displaying unusual abilities," the second agent said, his tone cold and calculating. "We need to understand what's happening to you, and how it connects to others like you." Daniel hesitated, unsure of what to say. Before he could respond, a car screeched to a halt outside the garage. A woman stepped out, her movements quick and purposeful. It was Sarah Bennett. "Don't trust them," she called out, her voice firm. She walked over to Daniel, ignoring the agent's protests. "They'll use you if they can. You're not safe here." The agents exchanged glances, their expressions hardening. "Ms. Bennett, we advise you to step away," one of them warned. Sarah ignored them, grabbing Daniel's arm. "Come with me. Now." Reluctantly, Daniel followed her to her car. As they sped away, he glanced back at the agents standing helplessly in the driveway. "Who are you?" he asked, still processing what had just happened. "I'm someone who knows what's going on," Sarah replied. "And I think you're part of something much bigger than you realize." Emily Dawson faced a different kind of trouble. Her growing powers had drawn attention too, but not from humans. Late one night, as she sat alone in her living room, a strange humming filled the air. Shadows flickered on the walls, and suddenly, three figures materialized in front of her. They were tall and slender, their skin pale and shimmering under the dim light. Their eyes glowed faintly, studying her with an intensity that made her shiver. "You are awakening," one of them said, its voice smooth and otherworldly. "But you must stop. Your kind is dangerous." Emily backed away, her heart pounding. "What do you want from me?" "We are here to prevent the return of the war gods," another figure replied. "If you continue down this path, destruction will follow." Before Emily could respond, a bright flash of light filled the room. When it faded, the figures were gone, leaving her shaken and confused. She didn't know who or what they were, but their words haunted her. Was she truly dangerous? And if so, could she stop what was happening to her? Sarah took Daniel. The alien ships hovered above Earth like massive shadows, their sleek surfaces reflecting the light of the sun. Commander Ziller's fleet had arrived in full force, and humanity was no longer unaware of their presence. News outlets buzzed with reports of unidentified objects in the sky, while governments scrambled to respond. Panic spread across cities as people looked up, unsure whether to feel awe or fear. Daniel Carter stood outside the cabin, staring at the glowing shapes in the distance. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the energy coursing through him. He could feel it growing stronger every day, as if his body was adapting to something far beyond his understanding. Sarah, Lucas, and Emily joined him, their faces tense but resolute. "We can't run anymore," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "They're here for us, for all of us. If we don't fight back, they'll take control." Lucas nodded, gripping a shovel he had brought outside. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. "What do you suggest we do?" "We're just regular people." "You're not regular anymore," Emily replied softly. Her voice carried a weight that made everyone pause. "None of us are. Whatever's happening to us, it's changing us. Maybe it's time we stop fighting it and start using it." Inside the cabin, the group gathered around a table cluttered with maps and notes. Sarah spread out a rough sketch of nearby terrain, pointing to key locations. "If we want to stand a chance, we need to find others like us. There have to be more people awakening, people who can help." "And how do we find them?" Daniel asked, leaning forward. "It's not like we can just put up flyers. We use what we've got," Sarah said firmly. She pulled out her laptop and opened a secure chat room she had created weeks ago. Messages poured in from strangers claiming to have unusual abilities. Some could move objects with their minds. Others reported seeing glimpses of the future. Each message was another piece of the puzzle, another sign that humanity was transforming. "We'll split up," Sarah continued. "Lucas, you and Emily head east. Look for anyone who might be hiding. Daniel and I will stay here and try to figure out what the aliens are planning." Meanwhile, Emily struggled with her own emotions. The encounter with the alien figures still haunted her, their words echoing in her mind. Asterisk. "Your kind is dangerous." Asterisk, was she truly a threat? Could she lose control of her powers and hurt someone? As they prepared to leave, she pulled Sarah aside. "What if they're right?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "What if we're not meant to wake up?" Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder, her expression softening. "I don't know what's going to happen," she admitted, "but running away won't change anything. If we're becoming something greater, then we owe it to ourselves, and to everyone else, to face it head-on." Emily nodded reluctantly, though doubt lingered in her eyes. As night fell, Daniel and Sarah stayed behind to monitor the alien activity. Using makeshift equipment, they picked up faint signals coming from the ships. The messages were garbled, but one phrase stood out. Asterisk, containment protocol initiated. Asterisk. "They're planning something," Daniel muttered, frowning at the screen. "Something big." Before Sarah could respond, a loud crash came from outside. They rushed to the window and saw a group of shadowy figures approaching the cabin. They weren't human. Their glowing eyes and metallic skin gave them away immediately. "They're here," Sarah breathed, grabbing a flashlight. "We need to move." Daniel clenched his fists, feeling the energy surge within him. For the first time, he didn't feel afraid. Instead, he felt ready. Ready to fight. Ready to discover who, or what, he was becoming. As the alien figures closed in, Daniel stepped forward, his hands crackling with light. The battle for humanity's future had begun, and there was no turning back. The alien figures moved quickly, their glowing eyes scanning the cabin with cold precision. Daniel stood in front of the door, his hands crackling with energy. He could feel the power surging through him, stronger than ever before. Behind him, Sarah held a flashlight like a weapon, her knuckles white from gripping it so tightly. "Stay back," Daniel warned, his voice firm despite the fear bubbling inside him. The aliens didn't respond. They advanced without hesitation, their movements fluid and unnatural. One of the figures raised a long metallic arm, pointing it directly at Daniel. A beam of light shot out, narrowly missing him as he dove to the side. The impact shattered part of the wall, sending splinters flying. Daniel rolled to his feet and thrust his hands forward, releasing a burst of energy that slammed into the nearest alien. It staggered backward, its body sparking, but it didn't fall. "They're tough," Sarah shouted, ducking behind a table as another blast tore through the air. "We need a plan." Daniel nodded, focusing harder. He remembered the feeling of the energy orb he'd created earlier and tried to summon something similar. This time, the orb was larger, brighter, and more stable. He hurled it toward the group of aliens, the explosion knocking them off their feet. For a moment, the room fell silent except for the sound of debris settling. "We can't stay here," Daniel said, glancing at Sarah. "They'll call for backup." Sarah grabbed her bag of notes and equipment, slinging it over her shoulder. "Let's go. There's a bunker east of here. Lucas mentioned it when we were planning." Meanwhile, Lucas and Emily traveled down a deserted highway, their car headlights cutting through the darkness. They had been following leads on possible awakened humans, but so far, they hadn't found anyone. Emily stared out the window, her mind heavy with. Inside the bunker, Daniel and Sarah worked quickly to set up defenses. The metal walls were sturdy, but they knew it wouldn't hold forever against the aliens' advanced technology. Daniel used his energy to reinforce the door, creating a shimmering barrier that pulsed faintly in the dim light. Sarah rummaged through the supplies, finding flashlights, batteries, and a few tools that might come in handy. "We need to figure out their next move," Sarah said, spreading a map on the table. "They're not just after us. They're targeting anyone with these abilities." Daniel nodded, still trying to catch his breath. "If we can find Lucas and Emily, maybe we can regroup. Together, we might stand a chance." Before they could make a plan, the ground trembled slightly. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. It wasn't the sound of footsteps. It was something bigger. Sarah glanced at Daniel, her eyes wide with fear. "They're scanning for us," she whispered. "We need to stay quiet." The two of them huddled near the back of the bunker, holding their breath as the hum intensified. Above them, the faint outline of an alien ship passed overhead, its shadow stretching across the forest canopy. After what felt like hours, the noise faded, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Meanwhile, Lucas and Emily were trapped. The alien ship loomed over their car, its bright lights pinning them in place. A group of figures descended from the craft, their glowing eyes fixed on the vehicle. Lucas gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing. "Stay calm," he muttered, though his voice betrayed his nerves. "Don't make any sudden moves." Emily nodded, clutching the edge of her seat. Her heart pounded as one of the aliens approached the car, its metallic hand reaching for the door. Suddenly, Emily's vision blurred again, and she felt a surge of power rush through her. Without thinking, she reached out mentally, connecting with the aliens' thoughts. She saw flashes of their mission, images of containment pods, experiments, and destruction. "They're here to capture us," Emily whispered urgently. "We have to get out of here." Lucas didn't hesitate. He slammed the car into reverse, spinning it around before flooring the accelerator. The aliens fired beams of light, narrowly missing the speeding vehicle. Trees blurred past as Lucas drove recklessly, trying to put distance between them and their pursuers. "We can't keep running," Emily said, her voice shaky. "We need to fight back." Lucas glanced at her, his jaw tightening. "How? We don't have powers like Daniel or Sarah." "Yes, we do," Emily replied firmly. "You've been practicing, haven't you? Use what you've learned." Lucas hesitated, then focused on the road ahead. He pictured the debris scattered along the highway. Rocks, fallen branches, anything heavy enough to cause damage. With a deep breath, he extended his hand, concentrating hard. Slowly, a large rock lifted into the air, hovering for a moment before flying backward toward the alien ship. It struck the hull with a loud clang, causing the vessel to wobble slightly. "It worked," Lucas exclaimed, a flicker of hope in his voice. But the victory was short-lived. The ship stabilized and resumed pursuit, its weapons charging ominously. Emily closed her eyes, focusing on the emotions radiating from the aliens. Fear, determination, and something else, uncertainty. She pushed back, sending waves of confusion into their minds. For a brief moment, the aliens faltered, giving Lucas enough time to veer off the road and disappear into the woods. Back at the bunker, Daniel and Sarah heard the distant sounds of explosions and energy blasts. They exchanged worried glances, knowing their friends were in danger. "We can't stay here," Daniel said, standing up. "If we're going to survive, we need to find the others, and fast." Sarah nodded, grabbing her bag. "Let's move. But be careful. The aliens aren't the only ones hunting us." As they stepped outside, the forest was eerily quiet. The stars above twinkled faintly, but the presence of the alien fleet loomed heavily in the air. Somewhere out there, humanity's future hung in the balance. And for the first time, Daniel and Sarah felt the weight of their awakening, not as ordinary people, but as something far greater. The battle began in the early hours of the morning, as Earth's atmosphere filled with streaks of light from alien ships descending into orbit. Daniel, Sarah, Lucas, and Emily had finally reunited at an abandoned military base on the outskirts of a small town. The group worked together to set up defenses, using whatever they could find to fortify their position. Old trucks were overturned to create barriers, and makeshift weapons were crafted from scraps of metal and salvaged electronics. Daniel stood at the edge of the base, his hands glowing faintly as he prepared for what was coming. He could feel the energy pulsing through him, stronger than ever before. Beside him, Lucas focused on moving large pieces of debris into place, his powers now more refined after days of practice. Emily sat cross-legged on the ground, her eyes closed as she tried to sense the emotions of the approaching enemy. Sarah paced back and forth, clutching a walkie-talkie and coordinating their efforts. "They're close," Emily said suddenly, opening her eyes. Her voice was calm but urgent. "I can feel them. They're scared, but determined." Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "Then we don't have much time." Above them, the sky lit up as the alien fleet began its assault. Beams of energy rained down, striking the ground with deafening booms. The earth shook violently, sending clouds of dust into the air. Daniel raised his hands, creating a shimmering shield that absorbed the impact of several blasts. For every shot deflected, another came hurtling toward them. "Lucas!" Daniel shouted over the chaos. "We need cover." Lucas didn't hesitate. With a deep breath, he focused on the wreckage around them, lifting chunks of concrete and twisted metal into the air. He formed a protective dome above the group, shielding them from the worst of the attack. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he struggled to maintain control, but he held firm. Emily stepped forward, her presence calm amidst the storm. She closed her eyes again, reaching out with her mind. This time, she didn't just sense emotions. She pushed back, flooding the minds of the aliens with confusion and doubt. Their attacks faltered momentarily, giving the group a brief reprieve. "We can't keep this up forever," Sarah yelled, reloading a rifle they had scavenged. "We need to hit them where it hurts." Daniel nodded, his expression fierce. "Let's take the fight to them." With renewed determination, the four of them launched a counterattack. Daniel unleashed waves of energy, targeting the nearest ships with precision. His power tore through their hulls, sending sparks flying as the vessels spiraled out of control. Lucas joined in, hurling massive rocks and debris at the remaining ships, his aim growing steadier with each throw. Sarah and Emily worked together, using their wits and abilities to outmaneuver the enemy. Sarah directed their movements, calling out weak points in the alien formation, while Emily disrupted their coordination. The aliens' once unstoppable force began to crumble under the combined strength of the awakened humans. But the cost was high. The battlefield was littered with destruction, burnt-out vehicles, shattered buildings, and smoking craters. Each blast that struck too close left its mark, both physically and emotionally. Yet the group pressed on, driven by the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. As the final alien ship retreated, its engines sputtering, the group collapsed onto the ground, exhausted but victorious. The sky above cleared slightly, revealing the first hints of dawn. For the first time in days, there was silence. "We did it," Lucas whispered, his voice hoarse from shouting. Daniel shook his head, staring at his glowing hands. "No, this isn't over. Not yet." Far above, Commander Ziller watched the retreat of his fleet, his expression unreadable. He knew humanity's awakening had only just begun, and so had the war. The aftermath of the battle was a mix of relief and unease. The alien fleet had retreated, but no one believed it was truly over. Daniel stood on the edge of the military base, staring at the horizon where the last ship had disappeared. His hand still glowed faintly, a reminder of the power coursing through him. He felt different now, stronger, but also heavier, as if the weight of the universe rested on his shoulders. Behind him, Sarah approached, her steps slow and deliberate. "You okay?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with concern. Daniel shook his head slightly. "I don't know. I feel changed, like I'm not the same person I was before." Sarah nodded, understanding what he meant. "None of us are. But maybe that's not such a bad thing." Lucas and Emily joined them, their faces weary but resolute. Lucas carried a piece of twisted metal he had salvaged from the battlefield, turning it over in his hands. "What do we do now?" he asked, breaking the silence. "They'll be back. And next time, they might not hold back." Emily looked up at the sky, her eyes distant. "We prepare," she said firmly. "We've only scratched the surface of what we can do. If we're going to survive, we need to embrace this fully." In the days that followed, the group began rebuilding, not just their defenses, but themselves. They trained together, pushing their abilities to new limits. Daniel learned to control his energy more precisely, shaping it into weapons or shields as needed. Lucas practiced moving larger objects, honing his focus until he could lift entire vehicles with ease. Emily worked on expanding her mental reach, learning to calm crowds or disrupt entire groups of enemies with a single thought. Sarah took charge of strategy, studying patterns and devising plans for future battles. Word of their victory spread quickly, reaching others like them who were beginning to awaken. People from all over the world traveled to the base, drawn by a shared sense of purpose. Some came with powers already manifesting, while others arrived unsure but eager to learn. Together, they formed a growing community, a coalition of awakened humans united by the knowledge that they were no longer ordinary. Commander Zillar watched from afar, his fleet regrouping in orbit. He had underestimated humanity, and the cost had been high. But he knew the fight wasn't over. The warning on the ancient tablet echoed in his mind. Asterisk, humans are sleeping war gods. Asterisk now. Those gods were stirring, and Ziller couldn't predict what would happen when they fully awoke. "We must be ready," Vren said, standing beside him. Her voice was steady, but her glowing eyes betrayed her fear. Ziller nodded grimly. "We will return. And when we do, we must ensure they cannot rise again." Back on Earth, Daniel addressed the growing group of awakened humans. They gathered around him, their faces filled with hope and determination. "This isn't just about survival," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "It's about remembering who we are and choosing what kind of future we want to build." The group erupted into cheers, their voices blending into a chorus of unity. For the first time in centuries, humanity stood on the brink of something extraordinary. The path ahead would be difficult, but they were no longer afraid. As the sun rose over the horizon, its light bathed the makeshift base in a golden glow. Earth sparkled faintly in the vast expanse of space, a beacon of untapped potential. Somewhere deep within each of them, the echoes of their forgotten past whispered promises of greatness or destruction. Only time would tell which path they would choose.